tinda dina di dina dina di dina din tuk dina tuna katta dak tuk dina din tinda din tinda tuk duna katta tuk dina.
Welcome back, everyone, to Odisha Design Week. We have our second speaker for this afternoon, Dan Griner. And Dan is the Director of Design, Innovation, and Strategy at University of Colorado, Denver. His career spans over 20 years in design and creative leadership roles. In the course of his design career, he has worked in the US and overseas in education design and in practice as a teacher in the classroom. So along with my team from Odisha Design Group, I am really pleased to have Dan Griner to speak to us about design responsibility and design colonization. Please welcome Dan. Off to you, Dan.
Thank you so much for the introduction. You'll have to forgive me if I'm a little sluggish this morning. It's 2:30 a.m. here in the U.S.
Oh, thank you so much.
But I'm very proud to be here and supporting this effort. I spent a few years as a Punegar in Pune, living and working with the DSK International Campus and have many wonderful, talented students that are now professionals across the world. And I'm very happy to have been connected with India in that way. But what I wanted to talk about today was about design responsibility. And I mentioned design colonialism because I don't want to perpetuate that, right? So while everything I talk about today is something that we should all practice, the way we practice it and how we can apply it to our countries, to our cultures is going to be different. And it's going to mean different things to each of us. So what I'd like to do is present a short kind of demonstration. You'll notice that most of my comments are questions because first and foremost, I think designers are thinkers and they have to come up with ways of doing things that have never been done before. And I think we are uniquely talented to take on the challenges that present now in this current age. So without any further ado or preamble, I'll start showing you some pictures instead of looking at my face. So just a moment. I hope you can see this okay. So
yes,
for me, I was educated as an industrial designer, right? And there was a much heavier importance put upon aesthetics. We were taught how to draw. We were taught how to create beautiful things, right? Things that people desired and wanted and valued. And we brought that value to companies. We brought that value to people who could use that beauty to sell something, right? Rarely was it used in a way that was altruistic. It was always for profit. And while that's an important part, right, we do have to create things that are of value to people. The ethical part of it was not as important. There is that phrase, right? Form follows function. But when outside of school and in practice, a lot of times it's, that does not necessarily rule out. So aesthetics ended up over ethics in many cases in my professional career, which I've had to reinvestigate and look at more closely. So one thing I would like to ask and to think about throughout this discussion is, instead of form follows function, should we think more as design follows conscience? And our consciences are all different and are going to allow us to do different things or rationalize different things. And that's where I think that we all have to think about what that means to us as designers, and what that means to us as humans in our communities and in our cultures. But that's the question that I pose. The reason I pose this is because we are faced with some unprecedented challenges. These are people sleeping outside in New Delhi because of the heat, right? Our planet is continuing to rise in temperature. This is also in New Delhi, where there are people who are being admitted for heat exhaustion. At a certain temperature, our bodies are just not able to function. We are not able to function as humans at a certain temperature. So we have challenges and issues that we have to deal with. This is one of the issues here. So from 1900 to 1980, right? So from basically the Industrial Revolution to 1980, temperature record was set every 13.5 years. Since 1980, it's every 3 years. And we are seeing temperatures growing and growing to the point where some places are uninhabitable. People are being hospitalized. And never is that more apparent than in places that are less developed or have larger populations, where there's not access to resources in order to avoid this situation. So there are still many people who do not agree that climate change is a threat, despite all the evidence to the contrary. So another challenge that we can look at. This is, and it cut me off here a little bit. It looks like the presentation is cut off, but the amount of plastic that is finding its way into our oceans, into our seas, is estimated to be the same weight. This is every year as 40 aircraft carriers. And they always come up with these weird, ways to judge things. But we have, this is the they call it the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This patch is as big, some of the estimates, as the United States. So we've created a mass of garbage as large as the United States, which is almost a continent unto itself. A very, very large amount. And frankly, we did this. We can't blame this on solar flares or natural conglomeration or collection of CO2. This is our trash. This is stuff that we have created and we have decided was no longer valuable, and we threw away, right? So we're faced with a challenge here. And while each country deals with these things in different ways, we're all in the same boat. We're all on the same planet, right? Our oceans are all connected. So we're very much like these people that are sitting in a boat here. So, the people on one end are saying, sure, glad the hole isn't on our end, while people on another part are dealing with the consequences of that. And our planet is increasingly faced with this. Countries that have used more than the average amount of resources, and I'll name mine as definitely guilty of that. We use more resources than most countries in the Western world, and then also in many of the Eastern countries. So we are very guilty of this, but we're now sharing a global issue, right? We can't sit on one end of the boat and say, well, those islands in the Caribbean, they can get boats, they don't need to live on land. So we can't divorce ourselves from these issues. And the way that we are approaching these things we are approaching what could be a global extinction. And we aren't taking it on in a smart way, right? We're avoiding, we're making the least amount of impact that we can to our economic systems first, and continuing to create pollution and things at levels that is unsustainable. We can't live like this, not for long. So I would compare it to this. Imagine if dinosaurs had some sort of asteroid attractor, and they were sitting out there pulling asteroids closer to the planet, and to bring about their own extinction. In a way, we're doing this very slowly, right? We've been doing this for thousands of years. We've been affecting our planet, but now it is increasing to the point where we are in probably our last 100 years of having a sustainable planet to live on. And as designers, what is our responsibility, right? Another cheerful topic that I'm sure you've all been affected by, and we're online because of COVID. This has shown how our countries are no longer separated. They have to think globally. And when it comes to a pandemic, we're all increasingly forced to think about how this impacts other people, how countries are dealing with this, how vaccines are spread around and shared between countries. And this pandemic, it's obviously the first of my lifetime. It forced me to learn and think and rethink about a lot of things, as I'm sure it should for anyone who's dealing with this. Currently, this pandemic has killed 5.3 million people worldwide. Yesterday, December 13th, over 7,000 people died. So it's continuing to affect us in such a tough way. These are all big, nasty problems, right? Difficult things to deal with. For me, as a designer, as a person who wants to affect and change things, I want to take on these challenges. I want to make my world better, not just more beautiful, but more habitable, more easy for people to enjoy. And now I also have a son, so I was forced to. I don't know how you guys spent your pandemic so far, but much of it was spent like this, right? Over Zoom, distanced from people, unable to connect with friends, family, loved ones, workmates. And if you were very lucky, you had a job that allowed you to connect in this way, and an internet connection that allowed you to work this way. But the majority of humans on this planet did not necessarily have that ability and that connection. So they're forced to deal with some more difficult situations. For me, I had lost my job in March 5th of 2020. I was working for a large manufacturer of cell phone cases and cases for electronic products called OtterBox. And they're a very big company in the US. But I was forced immediately to rethink about what I was going to do with that time. Do I catch up on all the Netflix episodes of every show that exists? Do I try to go out and get some more exercise? What do I do with this time, right? And with this many people dying and our society's facing this really difficult threat, I really felt like I wanted to do something that was of value. And so March 5th, I lost my job. And March 15th, I helped to create a nonprofit called Make for COVID. Now, this was a Colorado-based nonprofit where we were specifically trying to meet the needs of the people in our state, right? We were trying to to kink the hose to increase the pressure a little bit, right? So we were able to get within three months, we were able to get 2,000 volunteers, $500,000 raised. We created 120,000 pieces of PPE, personal protective equipment, for hospital workers. We teamed up with the Civil Air Patrol, who was able to airdrop these to remote hospitals and things like that all around Colorado. I personally explored my network, and among those volunteers, we had 40 designers and engineers that were working on 7 different types of PPE and things that would be needed during the pandemic. So I felt good about what I was doing. I felt like I was adding some value. I was trying to take this problem head on. I was helping protect people from COVID in the only way that I could as a designer. And like most things, if you feel proud about yourself and you look on the internet, you very quickly realize that you're not the only person doing good things. There are many people doing good things, and many people are doing things even better, right? And I was reconnected with some people that I had met while I was in India. And I was extremely proud of the work they were doing. This is a group called Makers Asylum. They have 2 locations, one in Mumbai and one in Goa. And Vaibhav and Rishi are 2 of the founders. And I had met them when I lived in India. And they were just starting out their makerspace and connecting with designers and engineers and people, makers who wanted to create things. And they took up the same challenge in a way that I thought was unprecedented. They were able to get 40 different cities of satellite locations that were creating face shields and personal protective equipment. Within 49 days, they created over 1 million face shields, 1 million pieces of PPE. So while I felt really good about the 120,000 rather that we did, I was blown away and so impressed with the work that was being done here. And as the pandemic started to take hold in India, they continued developing different types of work. The oxygen concentrators that were needed with the shortage of oxygen in India, they took this on as well. So there are always people. There's a children's television show here in America called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And this is back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when I was pretty old, when I was a kid. And Mr. Rogers was a really noted kind of philanthropist and very empathetic guy. But he said, whenever you see something terrible going on, whenever you're saddened by a tragedy, look for the helpers, right? And that helped me, thinking that way, helped me to get through this. And as a designer, I felt like this was my responsibility. This is what we should all be doing. And as I looked around at my group of friends who are designers, I saw some who resonated with that, but I saw many who didn't and who weren't connected in that way, weren't looking for ways to add value in that way. And I thought, what a shame. I thought, what a shame that we don't have their skills to add to this effort. What a shame that they aren't able to use their ability in a way that is that benefits other people, right? Not just for money, but for the good of mankind, right? So let me continue on. So it made me think more, I felt like it was my responsibility. As designers, though, is this our responsibility? Do we have a responsibility to make things better? Do we have a responsibility to tackle the problems that we see, or just the problems that we are pointed to? And I think more and more as time goes on, as we are faced with these unprecedented challenges, that we are unable to ignore. Our responsibility is going to grow as designers. We can't just make things beautiful. We have to increasingly make them work for the planet. This question was posed to the idea of a design Hippocratic oath. This was brought up to Tim Brown, and he's one of the founders of IDEO, one of the most famous product design companies, and they took participatory design, which has been around since the 40s and 50s, and then they branded their own version of it called design thinking. And I was a little disappointed at what his thought was here. So he said, yeah, he was asked about what he thought about a design Hippocratic oath, and he said, well, one thing it's definitely not, which is a Hippocratic oath as we think about in the medical world. Because if we made the oath to first do no harm as designers, we would likely never do anything new. I think that would be unfortunate. I think we need systems to ensure that we don't do too much harm or we don't harm intentionally. But I worry about an automatic reaction to the kind of ethical dilemmas that we have today with technology. We're not going to take risks. I would rather see us make the oath to be extremely adept learners and not disengage. So while I understand some of the sentiment here of, we like to break things in order to remake them. We like to understand and take risks in order to, find the innovation in something. I think it's an underestimation of our capability. I think it's an underestimation of what we can do with design, what we can do with our capabilities. I feel that I am extremely lucky to be able to use what I feel are some innate skills coupled with my education and experience, and create things that are beautiful, that are useful, that people like, and people can enjoy. But oftentimes companies use those talents just for their profit or for very short-term goals, right? So like I mentioned, that previous company I worked for, they every year would change the design of their cell phone cases, a minuscule amount. So, I have 20 years of experience and I spend it doing this minor adjustment to a radii or an edge of a product, and that's design. I think we need to hold ourselves to a slightly higher standard, and I don't think that that's going to come necessarily from industry. I think we have to have that mindset. We have to think of how we are going to push that. If you're coming just out of school, it might be more challenging to do that. You're not going to have maybe the voice or the platform to be able to speak. But over time, with experience, I think you will be able to push things in that way, provide options and solutions that were not looked for by the companies that are hiring you, by the people that are wanting to pay you for your skills. So I want to challenge us to think better than Tim here, and to be more than Tim imagines us to be. Because as designers, we really thrive on constraints, right? You've all heard the thought that an artist's worst enemy is the empty page, right? As soon as you put a mark on it, now you can build something, right? You can create something off of that. But where to start? And I think we need to add a new constraint to the way that we work. We talk about human-centered design, and really everything that we've created since the beginning of time has been human-centered, right? We think about what is useful to us. And we have a lot of neighbors on this planet, not just other humans, but there's an estimate of between 8 million other species of animals that live on this planet, not to mention plants. And between 8 and 100 million is what the estimate is. We haven't named them all. We haven't figured out where they all live or what their needs are, but we certainly don't take them into consideration for the most part when we are creating products, when we are thinking about the long tail of effects from the things that we create. So my question is, can we design no harm? Could we think beyond just harming other humans? Could we design no harm for our planet or for some of the other species that call this planet home? Because we are, while this planet is, we've evolved here, right? We've grown up here as a species and really adapted our use of it to a way that really fits us. We have now gone past that, right? We've started to affect it in a negative way that is no longer good for us. It's no longer serving our needs. And we're going to do the exact same. We'll take all those 8 million or 100 million species along with us on that ride and make the whole place uninhabitable, much like those dinosaurs who are trying to attract asteroids, right? So how can we do that? There are some theories in some ways that people have thought of this. One is meta design. I had the privilege of meeting a meta designer back in, what was it, 2012, I think, in Seoul. John Wood, he's a professor emeritus at Goldsmiths University in London. And he spent a lot of time and a lot of thought around this particular topic of meta design. And I would encourage you to look him up and look up this method. And while it might seem really overbearing as a way of thinking, it really starts to get to the level of thinking that we're going to have to start getting to as designers. We're going to have to think about systemic thinking beyond humans, right? Human-centered design is not enough. We've already been doing that. And as I said, every design has been human-centered. It may not be every human, but we've only benefited humans with these designs. So how do we now start to think at that level? How can we integrate this type of thinking into our processes? So I would encourage you to look at this. Meta design as a paradigm change requires systemic thinking. Therefore, designers should be trained for this. All right. I don't think design education. I know I asked George Joseph this in his discussion about whether he thought education was keeping up. I think it's education's job to stay ahead, right? Because our education system is preparing people for the industry, which means they are at least 4 years away. Some of you longer, at least 4 years away from being able to enter that industry, which means you're preparing for the future with the past's information. So I really feel education has a big stake in this, but we believe it would help them to find more comprehensive, join up ways of thinking for society to feed, clothe, shelter, assemble, communicate, and heal itself. This broad approach would also need to work in harmony with fiscal and legislative approaches, right? So we need to get more than just ourselves on board and more than just our company that we might be working with. And you might think that, everything's been designed, everything's been created, but this type of thinking changes our approach to our built environment, to everything that we do. So this provides an endless amount of new opportunities and new challenges for us to take on as designers, right? Adding this new constraint really opens up the field of things that we can create and do. And I think it's a valuable thing for us to think about. So can we think beyond human-centered design? I know it's a lot to learn human-centered design and all the methods and processes there, but I think there's more things that you could do besides human-centered design. Meta design starts to bring that type of um, thinking. So this is a phrase that came out in the 70s, and it's contested as to who exactly said it. But I think it has some value here. I think it has that kind of top level. I myself, living in America, I can think this way. You, students and people from internationally, from India or from wherever you're visiting, you can think this way. I don't have to worry about trying to impose my ideas upon another country. I'm trying to think globally. Are the things that I'm doing here, right? And this is what I think about sometimes, right? So I had some pictures for this, but I thought it was too gruesome to show. But I'm gonna talk to you about it anyway. When we die, at least in many Western countries, we get buried and we have a tombstone, right? And as designers, we have a second tombstone, which is the landfill where all of our products end up, right? At some point, they outlive their usefulness, just like us. Our human bodies outlive their usefulness, and we get buried, and so do all of the things that we create. I don't want to leave those things behind for fish to be kicking around in 100 years, or my son to have to step on and say, "Oh, this is my dad. I think my dad designed this." That is like my worst nightmare, frankly. So I think if we can think about this, thinking globally while acting locally, right? Like Vaibhav and Rishi from Makers Asylum, they acted locally, right? They provided value for their community in a way that only they could. They used this design skill, this value, in a way that was going to help their community and their whole country, right? I'm extremely proud of the work they did. So acting locally to benefit your community in a way that matches with your culture and the needs of that culture, but then thinking globally always, not just about humans, but all the other people that we call neighbors, or all the other things we call neighbors on this planet. So looks like I'll have some lounge time and will be coffee and maybe some refreshments or something, some chai and some biscuits, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, we would love to do all of that, Dan. Maybe next time. Yeah. And yeah. And
well, I think we'll have some time to look at maybe portfolios or to talk some more. As I said, I think these are questions because I don't have the answers. I'm just trying to get us to think more, right? So if anyone wants to talk about that, I'd love to.
yeah, that was awesome. Very insightful. If any of you have any questions for Dan, Dan will be happy to answer. Otherwise, it was a wonderful session, Dan. Really, thank you, first of all, for joining us and, spreading your questions. I mean, it helps us to start think about those things. It's like that's where we should start, right? Start with the questions. How might we? Why? What? How? So,
right.
Yeah, you got us thinking. And at this hour for your, time zone, we really thank you and appreciate for coming over. I think Nima has a question. He asks, do you think it is time for the creators to run the companies to work towards these new ideas?
Well, so if you've ever tried to run a company, I've run 3 of my own companies over that time. It takes different kinds of people to make a company work. And creators aren't always the best CEOs. They don't always make the best CEOs. You need different people. I think people need to be open to and have the right focus when they're creating a company. There is some amazing companies that are being created that are thinking about not just their impact with their employees or their bottom line, their what they make per year, but they're also thinking about the long-term effects of their product on the environment. So they think about the product, the types of materials they use. They think about how they market their product. They think about where they invest money as their profit, right? Some companies that come to mind, that just off the top of my head, like, oh shoot, I'm trying to remember now. Patagonia, they do a lot to reinvest their money back into the environment, right? So that they are an outdoor clothing company, and their company wouldn't exist without an enjoyment of the outdoors. So they think about that, and they think about, how can I make sure people can continue to enjoy the outdoors? Well, that requires environmental consciousness. That requires an investment back into those spaces, so that future generations can use them, and then their company is still valuable in the future. So I think the creators, if the creators have the right mindset and they have that skill and ability, absolutely go for it. But I think it takes a team to take that on, right? Yes, I totally agree, Nima. Profit can't just be measured in financial terms. I would say maybe not profit, but value, right? Value. So
Yeah.
And I see George is commenting. I poked my head into his talk, and I really appreciate it. Let me take a moment and just read what you said here, George. I'm glad you agree. I'm glad you agree, because I know that you're on the forefront of working in some of these really differentiated communities where they need this type of thinking. They need thinking that goes beyond just the human, but interacting with their environment.
Yeah. And I'm sure we all add the plus ones for whatever insights you have just mentioned, Dan. Definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was really great having Dan here. Like we mentioned, if you can move to the lounge area, we'll probably have some people who would wish to have your inputs for their portfolios. And again, I had taken up this course from IXDF from Don Norman, Designing for the 21st Century.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful course. And, it deals with a lot of points that you just mentioned, and it's an eye opener by itself. And coincidentally, I have to mention my husband is, he just started an MBA program with University of Colorado, Denver, majoring in sustainability. So, and he's thoroughly enjoying it. So,
oh my goodness. Is he just doing it remotely, or is he actually?
He's doing it remotely, and I mean, we've lived in the US for quite some time and plan to move back, so that's why he started off with that. So it's a small world.
Please connect if you ever get a chance to come out. I'd love to host you and take you out for something.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you so much. And it was a great session, and I'm sure we all felt the same way about it. And any more questions, please feel free to have them on the chat here. Otherwise, Dan will be helping out reviewing portfolios in the lounge area.
Any other questions? I probably can't answer them, but I can make up something. All right. Well, I can continue answering some questions and then look at, have a two-way conversation with the audience in the lounge, I guess, right?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thanks again so much, Dan.
Thank you. I'll just go to the lounge. How do I get there?
Can somebody help Dan get into the lounge area, please? Let me quickly check with.
I think George would have made this this interface work, so I would.
We probably need to quit this session and then move to the lounge. We have to quit this session. And again, thanks everyone. After this session, we will have a short coffee break from 4 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. India time. And we will probably reconnect at around 4:15. We will have a quick networking session. It's called speed networking. So yeah, have a good break, and we'll see you soon at 4:30 sharp for our next speaker. So if you have to go for the lounge area for your portfolio reviews, please go ahead. Otherwise, we'll meet you soon at 4:30. Thank you.